Daddy, we're doing.
I'm doing a podcast, Dizzy. Hello and welcome to the Too Cool for School podcast. I'm your host, Yannick, and on today's episode, I've got an amazing guest and we will be discussing special educational needs, and I'll allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, thanks for having me, Yannick. So I'm Azryah. I am a special educational needs coordinator in a primary school in Newham and a DEI consultant.
Okay, cool stuff. So how long have you been working in SEND?
SEND from about 2020, I believe. Yeah, 2020. So I'm in my 6th year working in SEND.
And how have you found it so far?
Well, I started in a SEMH school, so social, emotional, mental health, and a lot of it there was, you have children with diagnosis, for example, autism, ADHD, those kind of things, but their main barrier was kind of like their emotional regulation, their behaviour in school, and just coping in a mainstream setting. So I loved working in that school. Yeah. It was wild, but it was like, I loved working in that school, but it was small. There wasn't really much room for growth because it was like 8 kids in a class. And yeah, I was just, at the time, I was just kind of a bit jaded by teaching, so I left. And then I've come back.
You're back.
And now I'm in a mainstream school, which is completely different. Yeah.
And I wanted to ask as well, so over the last 12 months, there's been a lot around, like, SEND reform, scrapping EHCP, etc. And there's been, sort of cases on both sides of the fence. And I wanted to ask, like, from your perspective, do you think that mainstream schools still have the capacity to support SEND? You didn't even let me finish the question.
No, they don't. No, they don't have. They have the capacity to keep children safe in school, physically safe. They have the capacity to maybe even keep children, even maybe satisfied, content, happy. But do they have the capacity to help these children fulfill their potential and actually be able? I don't know. I don't think we can do it all for the SEND children. I feel like we're having to choose between, they have somewhere to come to where they feel safe and where they might be able to maybe make friendships or, have positive adults. But I don't feel like they're getting the full experience of being in a school and accessing every opportunity that the school has to offer, because we just don't have the capacity and we're kind of having to pick. So I know for a lot of our SEN kids, I believe that they're happy in school, but are they accessing the curriculum? Are they working towards accessing the curriculum? Are they learning enough skills? Are they, doing enough actual work? Like there's elements that are missing. They're not getting the best we can offer. They're just getting enough that parents can trust that their children can go to school on a daily basis.
What do you think it is about mainstream schools that has essentially led to that? Like what aspects of their provision are they not providing for those students?
So the thing with mainstream schools at the moment, it's the circumstances under which mainstream schools have to function. So I taught in a school, my first school, or I say my second school, but my first SEN gig. That school, the children would throw chairs at me. They were violent. They would swear. They would cry. They would be so dysregulated. So often, every single day, I would look at kids and think, I don't think I've ever been this angry or distressed in my life.
Well,
so thinking about their cortisol, literally their stress hormones, I'm just like, what this is doing to your body, I don't even know. But I found that less stressful than working in a mainstream school, and I don't have any children who behave like that. And I didn't. That job did not stress me out, and it's because the context was appropriate. I had 3 other adults in my class with me, and I had 8 kids. If the child didn't do work, I didn't have to think, shit, they're not doing any work. They're not going to have anything in the book. It was fine if they didn't do the work, because the focus was on getting them to a place where they could come into school and just not hit. Or the focus was different. There was so much development that they had to do socially, emotionally, and the school understood that was the focus for them. And once they got over that barrier, then you could really start pushing them. Because if you've got a child who is insecure, feels like a moron, can't do the maths, has adverse experiences, and then you're like, you have to finish this work, and if you don't finish this work, you're not going out to break. We know that that's not going to work, and we have the capacity to say, okay, we're not going to do that. Every morning, if you just come in, sit on the carpet, talk to me, don't swear, don't throw a chair, and have a good morning, that's enough. I don't have that luxury. in mainstream schools don't have that luxury. I don't have additional adults. If a child is kicking off, I don't have another adult there to support, but I've still got a whole class to teach in a mainstream school. So you have enough money when you're in special provision. Every single child has an EHCP. They didn't come to us without one. So we've got more than enough money to have the resources to have the adults. Don't have that in a mainstream school. And I could go, the list goes on.
And do you think that's because, like, in mainstream schools, like, the criteria that a lot of those SEND students are sort of put up against is to have to meet sort of like age-related
that's one of them.
requirements.
Mm-hmm.
So often, like, you have meetings with, schools will have meetings with parents and say, oh, but your child is in year 10, but they're working at,
exactly,
year 6, year 7 levels. But so you think, okay, so that's one of the barriers in terms of, like, their, expected working levels. But then is there an argument then that, so for the students that have been in mainstream schools, is there an argument that for the SEND students that have been in mainstream schools and are struggling, that they should have been in maybe specialist provisions much more earlier? Yeah. And I want you to consider this in the context of, like, children develop differently.
Yeah.
And I've seen, and again, this is only secondary context, but I've seen children who have SEND needs in year 7, when it's got to year 11, like, they're a completely different person. Like, they've grown, they've flourished. So like, what are your thoughts on that? So
it's definitely nuanced. So I think that what's happening is there was this push on inclusion, which I think was right. I've worked in some, like, special provision schools, resource provision, and I remember I was doing supply work in one, and I was like, I can't work here. This place depresses me. I'm not doing it. I'm not going back to school. It was awful. Well, there was nothing for the kids, like nothing. And I was like, I got into it with the one of the head teachers, and I called the agency the next day, and I was like, I'm not going to go back because I'm not going to be cooperative. I'm not going to be agreeable. So I think it's best if you just find somebody else. And this was before I went. I knew I was about to go back to mainstream schools in September, and I was like, this is not a good setup for me because I'm going to be questioning my choice for the whole of the summer holidays. So I left, and I remember thinking, I hate that those children they essentially looked away. It reminded me of a prison yard school. Like, I really didn't like it. And
mainstream school, that
was a SEND provision. And I remember thinking, this is a horrible environment. I don't like it. And you can tell that there is no care that has gone into these children, because in terms of when they grow up and in terms of the kind of members of society that you think are valuable, I just don't think they're perceived in that way. The funds are going elsewhere, right? And so it made me feel very uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. And so there's this push on inclusion, which I understand, because it comes from parents being like, my child is in this resource provision and it's horrible. There's nothing. They're not treated like, they're just not treated with the same dignity as some of the children that you get in mainstream schools. So I 100% understand that push for inclusion. But what's happened is, I think the government has realised, actually, if we can get these children into mainstream schools, it's a lot cheaper. Resource provisions are expensive. So if we can get all these children into mainstream schools, that's great. We don't have to pay for these resource provisions, which means we're going to save money. But then it's all in the name of inclusion. They paint it like it's about inclusion and these children having the same access and same experiences as their peers who don't need the same accommodations. And they've taken advantage of the fact that parents rightfully would like their children not to be ostracized and to be considered as part, like, the same way as their peers. But they've taken advantage of that now, and they've weaponized it. And now they're saying, no, you have to include them, because if you're not including them, you're disadvantaging them, and it's not fair. But it's to the point, where it's like it's defeating the objective now, because now you're trying to fit round pegs into square holes. And yes, these children should absolutely be included, but you also need to recognise that if a child is dysregulated by noise and movement and activity, and you've got them in a continuous provision where you've got 60 reception children running around doing, I don't know, what we call call time, where they choose their own learning, that's not good for them either. So we then need the additional adult who can take them out at those times and have them somewhere in a sensory room or do an activity with an appropriate peer group, and then you can bring them back in. But there's no balance anymore. It's either they're in these resource provisions, which the parents hate, and so they put them in these mainstream schools, but they're not giving us what we need to support them.
Yeah. I've even in my current role, I find that difficult. So when I come in like from the local authority and I'm, you know, supporting schools and
What are you doing now, by the way? Sorry.
So I oversee attendance for the local authority that I work in. So often, you know, attendance is not just they're at 70%, 60%, but it's like actually what's happening at the home, and you know that's leading to this. But just in terms of, you know, when we're thinking about the capacity of the schools and what they're able and what they're not able to do, especially when it comes to like send children, even when they have EHCPs, schools are just saying, actually, no, we can't do this. We can't accommodate and add this person or do this or have the flexibility to do, you know, X, Y, and Z because, you know, our provisions and our resources don't allow for that. And, you know, you've spoken a lot about inclusion, and I wanted to ask, like, do you feel at this stage that we're at a stage where like inclusion is becoming like a buzzword, and from your perspective, like, what is inclusion? What does true inclusion look like within an education setting?
So I think inclusion, I feel like inclusion at this point needs to be, you know how you have words, right, and then language is co-opted and people start using it and taking advantage of the fact that this is a word that is significant, and so they're right. If we say inclusion, if we put inclusion in this policy, then it will make it sound like we're doing this for the benefit of the families, for the benefit of the schools, the children, etc. And so now I feel like the word has essentially been co-opted, and we need to change the word. And I really do feel like a better word is belonging, because in order to belong somewhere, I do not have to be in that place 100% of the time. I should be able to leave, come back. I should be able to I should belong in that space, whether or not I'm physically there. And I think there's a lot of children who do need to feel like they belong to a school community, who need to feel that they belong to a classroom, belong to a peer group. That does not mean that you need to be within the same four walls as these people for 6.5 hours a day. You should be able to be in your classroom when it's good for you. You should be able to go and be a part of a smaller peer group when it's good for you, and have no sense that I don't belong here anymore. And I think we need to kind of change the lens through which we think children feel ostracized, because I have children in my own class, and when they get to go out and they get to sit somewhere quiet, they love it. They love it. And they say, can we do this again? I have to say to them, yeah, you know, I don't know when though, because it's not timetabled in necessarily. And I see them and I think to myself, being out here does not make him feel ostracized. And I think that's a huge part to do with our school culture. But it just reminds me, like, this idea that you just cram them all into a classroom, that's not inclusion.
Yeah. No, that's interesting, that idea of belonging, because I'm thinking now, I'm not sure what piece of resource it is. Like, when I would do like one-to-one session with students trying to work on their like resilience and protective factors, I recall one of the cards would ask, like, do you feel like you belong at the school? And when students said no, like, that would really like hit me like, damn, like, why do you feel like you don't like belong at the school? And that sense of belonging is so important to how a student sees themselves in terms of, you know, whether they're included or not. So, you know, I just wanted to, you know, just for context as well for like the viewers and the audience. Obviously, we didn't go to school together, but we
went college together.
Yeah, but you know, because we went like Bons Angeles.
I consider it. So when I say I went to school with you guys, that's that's how I refer to you guys. That's how I went to school with you. Yeah,
we went to school together, and like during our time at school, and I've said this like in previous episodes, I don't recall like people having SEN needs or whatever, like diagnosed or titled or whatever.
Yeah.
You can look back now and think, yeah, that guy. Like now I know what it. Yeah. Now I know what it was.
For me, I remember there's one. I won't say his name, but there's one boy, and I remember at the time, and I don't think he had a diagnosis or anything like that. And you know when a lot of it comes out in like behavior. And I remember even at that age, I used to look at him and be like, this brother is special. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Even at the time, even as a child. And I remember this because I remember always thinking, this guy is special.
Yeah.
Like, But no one, but the way he was perceived wasn't like that. He was perceived as like just, naughty or whatever.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm like, it's so clear to me that his brain just works a bit differently. And obviously I'm probably remembering myself more fondly the way I remember it. But I always remember being like, I would look at it and I'm like, it's clear, I don't feel like we are necessarily, I know our brain doesn't work the same, but at the time you wouldn't have the language, but I remember that I knew that everyone else just thought he was naughty.
Maybe it's because we didn't have the language. I don't, like
definitely,
ADHD,
there was definitely less though.
autism, whatever. Like for me, even the people that I'm thinking of that I'm like, they would have been having to do like extreme things. Whereas now, like the threshold, I feel like any kid that just does anything.
Yeah, so this is really interesting. It's weird because on the one hand, because right now I'm doing my master's in social justice and education, and so SEND comes up a lot in that. Yeah. And there's something around, again, it's balance, isn't it? There's something around recognizing that actually we are going to get children with more diagnosis because we understand a lot better what these needs look like, how they manifest, like depending on your gender and all of that stuff. But equally, I feel like we pathologize a lot of behavior, and it's like he's just a child who needs support making better decisions. He's just a child who just feels his emotions a bit more than others. He's just a child who has a lot more, who is just more hyper. But everything then needs to be like, so what's wrong with him? Yeah. So what's the need? So how do we diagnose it? And it's and I'm constantly on this tightrope because I'm very much like, these children need support. It's a need. We need to recognize that diagnoses are wonderful. You can advocate for your children. It follows them as they go through the education. But equally, sometimes I'm just like, I just think that might just be their personality. I don't know.
That's the thing. Sometimes it might just be their personality, but we go into these meetings and sometimes it's not enough to just say, oh, you're just a child that needs a bit of...
And you feel bad.
People want a diagnosis.
Yeah.
They want, so what am I going to write on this form? Like they want a reason, and they want to associate that, with something. And, one of the things that I find difficult when it comes to that sort of narrative is, one, from a parental point of view sometimes, 3 points. One, from a parental point of view, I feel like parents won't take accountability. Mm-hmm. Oh, they've got this. Oh, CAMS, you got to deal with it. Or school, you got to deal with it, and blah, blah, blah. From a professional point of view, whether it's like schools, local authority or whatever else, I fear that for some practitioners, it's lazy work. You don't want to really do the work. You don't want to take the time to, work with the child and support them and do whatever. So let's just, put this title in them and whatever else. And 3, and again, this is from my perspective, and it would be good to hear from, a young person that has had a diagnosis. When I've heard young people say stuff, oh, it's because I've got ADHD. Yeah, because that's the narrative that... So now you're not even trying to find yourself, to learn yourself, to go through those natural experiences. Yeah. You just put yourself into this sort of cocoon, this bubble, this hole, because, that's the narrative, or that's the label that's been, attached to you. So I find that, I just find that very difficult.
Yeah, I done an essay on this exact form. I done an essay on this exact thing, talking about why we pathologize behavior and how it's really easy when we other someone so, when you other someone so distinctively, it's really easy to draw the line in the sand and be like, nope, he has this, therefore he needs to be over there. Or nope, he has this, therefore he is different to these children in these exact ways. And it makes it a lot easier to manage, if you can say he has ADHD. So that means definitively this, and this is wrong with him. And I know what to do if that's what's wrong with him. They're sorted. And it's and then that's it. But when it isn't that simple, you really have to dig deep. And you have to look at these children as individuals. And I think that takes a lot of time and effort. It takes a lot when you go home and you have to think, okay, what does this child need? And what does this child need? And what does this child need? for, I don't know, this lesson, or so that they can come to school and, I don't know, feel happy and safe or whatever. And to think about that 3 ways, you're just like, no, I want one thing and I want it to work for all 3 of them. So if they all have the same label, then at least that when Ofsted come looking or the head teacher comes looking, I have my narrative.
Yeah.
No, he's got this and I done that, because that's what you're meant to do when children have it. So get off my back. Leave me alone.
Yeah. And I wanted to know as well, so like working in SEND, how do you differentiate when a child's need is SEND related as opposed to trauma? Because often they might present in the same way, and they do present in the same way. So how do you know actually we need to be going through EdPsych, SENDCO and whatever else, or actually this guy needs therapeutic support and clinical service?
Yeah, and what's really hard about that is that therapeutic side isn't a thing in schools. So unless for example, CAMS is a good example, and I have teachers, my staff members, my colleagues that come to me and they say, I want to refer this child to CAMS, and I'm like, do the referral because you're doing your due diligence, but don't be disappointed when they reject it, because the threshold for CAMS, for example, we're talking suicide, self-harm, and especially when you have children who are younger, who are still under really strict guardianship, I feel like it's different for like secondary school children who have the freedom to go outside, to get mixed up in the wrong crowds, who are older now, don't listen to their parents, don't come home at night. You've got all of these really like severe adverse experiences coming out when they're older. And so when they're younger, those adverse experiences could be sorted then with the therapeutic side. But when they're 6 and you say that they're dysregulated and they're emotional, but there's no proof of autism or ADHD, a clinical diagnosis, they're like, oh yeah, they don't meet the threshold. Like then they wait until they get older, and it gets to that point where the trauma does manifest, and it gets to the point where it's like it's out of control. That I feel like that's when it gets picked up. And so even if you are able to distinguish, once you do distinguish it, once you do realize, oh, it's trauma, for example, it's not autism or whatever, you're like, you kind of don't want it to be, because if it is that, you're just like, I don't know what to do. And so you refer to things like early help and all of that stuff. But then often you might refer to early help and then they get in contact, but at that stage it's optional. So the parents say, no, we don't want any help. And then you're back to square one again. But I think I can't even say how you would necessarily it's based on the child, the family. You have to know their context,
the historical context,
to make decisions about all of those things. But
no, 100%. And I wanted to earlier I was mentioning about like the SEND reform, and I know there's been a lot of talks around like changes around EHCP, etc. Do you feel like the EHCPs are becoming like survival tools more than like proper support plans, with parents thinking that actually, do you know what, if I get this EHCP, my son's not going to be kicked out of the school, or it guarantees that I'm going to get them one-to-one support and whatever else, and that's not always that's not always the case. I don't know how it is in other local authorities, but I've worked with schools that have said outright to the parents, oh yeah, your son's got EHCP, we can't meet need. Like, we can't meet need. I don't know what you want us to do. Like, and
this is another thing that's happening, because parents are being rejected from. I say rejected, I mean, if the parent says that they want them to go there, there's actually nothing you can do. But let's say you're lower down on the list, right? And all of these other schools say, we can't provide the provision adequately, we can't meet the need, and they get to you and you're last on the list. If you're last on the list and you say you can't meet need, they're like, well, my child's got to go somewhere, so I don't care anymore. Like, and then you have to take them. And then it gets to the point where actually you're thinking, we genuinely cannot meet this child's needs.
Yeah.
But you can't do anything about it. And I think there's 2 things, and I've said that this is something we need to really pick up next year in my school. When we need to get the parents together, whether it's diagnoses, official diagnosis, whether it's suspected SEND, or whether these children actually already have EHCPs. There needs to be more education in schools, particularly when they come in reception. Parents need to know how the system works, because very often they're fighting you and you're like, it's not me. It's not me. I swear I have tried. I am doing everything I can. Like it's not me. And it's not that I want to say, oh, we can't. Because if there's one thing that I appreciate about my school, is that 1, everybody works very hard. 2, everybody goes above and beyond for those children. And 3, the children that come to our school, irrespective of whether or not we meet need or the provision is given, those children are happy. Like and I think that's one thing my school has really got right. Talking about that belonging and stuff, my school do that really well. And so when parents get upset, it makes us upset because we're like, I wish you knew how desperately we could give you good news and make you happy. Like, we would never say we cannot meet a child's needs unless we genuinely was like, this is gonna be the straw that breaks the camel's back, because we've got so much need. It's to the point where it's like, we want to take your child in, but if we take your child, it's not that we just can't meet your child's need. In order to meet your child's needs, we're going to have to start dropping the standards for a lot of the other children here who have SEN. And I think parents see the EHCP and they have it, and actually they don't actually know necessarily what it means. They think, I have an EHCP, therefore my child gets everything that they need in school. I think that's the connection that they make.
They need to know like the different thresholds,
the different
levels
thresholds, all of the other things you get outside of your EHCP, where you can get like social care budgets, where you can get healthcare budgets if your children have, medical needs, the DLA. Like, there's so many things that the parents don't realize. 1, they have recourse to, and 2, what they don't have recourse to. Your child is the EHCP, like you said, that does not mean at this point nobody has a one-to-one anymore.
Yeah.
That's not a thing. You might provide, like my school will provide that, because we're like, ultimately if we don't provide it, then this is not going to work. But you're not going to get that. You're not going to get that saying that in an EHCP. So
yeah,
it's a constant struggle. And
so when did you qualify?
So I haven't qualified yet. So I'm in my last. I'll qualify this summer, basically.
Okay, and in your studies at the moment to qualify, is there a lot of like teaching around like SEND stuff?
Well, it's very boring. It's all about it's all the statutory stuff.
Yeah.
It's really I think obviously it used to be a master's, like a third of a master's. So you would do it was a lot more interesting, I feel like. Yeah. But now it's really just focused on the statutory guidance. So all of that. What your obligations are. It's helpful, and I'm sure I will reach for the resources and things that I've got from it later down the line. But right now, just doing it back to back, it just feels very laborious.
So if we're thinking about mainstream schools in particular, I'm thinking about like teachers that may have 1 or 2 students in their class who have like EHCP plans, and like their mindset is that I'll just create like differentiated work for them, or get the TA to do whatever else. Like what would you want teachers to really know about like neurodivergent children?
That's a good question. What do I want teachers to know about you? I think, this is what I think I want teachers to know. Everything that your neurodiverse children need, your children who are neurotypical also need. And I think the only thing that distinguishes neurodiverse children from neurotypical children is how one group can cope without it. All those children in your class need what those SEN children need. The difference between them is that the rest of them will accept that they're not going to get it. And they'll just get on with it. Not all children need scaffolding to the same degree, but children need scaffolding, whether or not that scaffolding comes from the modelling that you're doing on the board, whether it comes from the individual sheet that you give them. All children need someone who's going to be patient with them. All children need someone who's going to make them feel good about themselves. All children need someone who's going to look at their work and give them feedback. All children need some time sometimes. All children would love a break out of the classroom, 5 minutes to cool down. All children would love to be able to... you see this... SEN children, for example, and they get angry and they scream. Do you know how many of those children internally want to scream? The only difference is that one of them go, I'm not allowed to do that. And the other one goes, I don't care. Or they don't realise they're not allowed to. Do you see? So I feel like it's not so much what I want teachers to know about SEN children. It's more what I want teachers to know about all children, because I feel like if you can provide, if you think about your SEN children, I guarantee that there are going to be numerous other children in your class who will really benefit from whatever you're putting in place for them. And so it's about figuring out, what scaffolding can I make that will benefit everybody? And then the next challenge is, now for those children who are excelling, who have really grasped this, who need to be challenged, how can I push them further? But I feel like we do we got the hires, and then you have the children who are working out or on the cusp, who just need to get there to be working out, and then you have the children who are a little bit low, and then you have the SEN children who are working significantly below, whether it's 2 years or not accessing the curriculum. And you think about your class, like you compartmentalize in this way, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to figure out how to teach this one lesson in 4 different ways. And then really and truly, if you're going to do that, you're not going to do it. You're not going to differentiate every lesson 4 different ways. Like nobody's going to do that. And so someone does end up not having what they need in that lesson. So I feel like I try and urge teachers to be like, when you're thinking of scaffolding for your class, think of the SEN children. If they use it, the other children in your class will use it. I have children who are brilliant writers, and I remember it was one day, and one of them got stuck. This girl is one of my hires, and she got stuck, and she for whatever reason, she's just like, I can't think of ideas. So I gave her the same sheet that I made to scaffold, some of the children in my mind who needed the support. And she used it. She didn't need it for the whole thing, but that after she used it, she was off and away and she could do it. But if I didn't have that sheet, I would have had to sit there and think of this whole new approach just for this singular child. So, and it doesn't always work. Sometimes I make scaffolds and it doesn't always work, but that's one thing that I've learned, I feel like, in my time.
Now that's important. I think taking that sort of whole classroom approach, I think would definitely benefit. And I wanted to know as well, do you think that black SEND children, like when it comes to black SEND children, that they're perceived as challenging or more challenging or having behavioural issues than like needing support?
Funnily
and
enough,
why is that?
I find that what happens with, because obviously I'm in primary school, so I feel like it's probably a little bit different. Although, however, like I look at kids and I see SEN children, and it's not so much that they're perceived as more challenging, it's actually that they're perceived as more able, like they're putting it on, like they're not actually as vulnerable as. So for example, you have a child who is smart, but that's something there. You haven't figured out what it is, but you're like, there's something there.
Yeah.
This is too consistent. He's too distressed. His parents are supportive. They work with us. They acknowledge all of it. And you just look at that child and you think, okay, there's something. But then somebody else looks at them and goes, they're so smart. They know what they're doing. And it's like, don't do that, because when it's them, they're smart. You know what they need to be ignored, that they need to, or whatever it is, however you handle that. But there can be this reluctance for them to not seen as more challenging, but seen as less vulnerable. So the same child who does that, who's white, for example, you don't say he knows what he's doing. You don't say, oh, he's so smart. Whether or not he is irrelevant, because they are. It's not saying that they're not smart, but the idea that they're manipulating you and they're using their intelligence and they're just so smart that they're outwitting you. Like they're 5, they're 4, they're 6, they're 9, or whatever it is. And so it's not that they're seen as more challenging; it's that they're seen as less vulnerable. Like they're putting it on, like this is a choice rather than a need. That's what I find. Yeah,
and do you feel like, and it might have evolved a bit, but I've still had, some experience of it over the last 5 years. But do you feel like there's still like some black parents that still have like a stigma around SEND, and why do you think that is? I find it's
not even just a lot of different
ethnic
minorities. Yeah, ethnic minorities in particular. Whether like in Newham, it would be, or just around here, it would be mainly. I would say it's mainly Black, African, Caribbean, South Asian. And you find that the parents are either there's lots of like denial, and just categorically like, no, they're fine. Sometimes it's a lack of context, because sometimes if it's their first child and they don't have any older siblings, sometimes they're actually not aware of where the development should be, and it's only as they get older, and because when they're in reception they're all pretty, and as they get older you see the gaps start to widen and the parents start to go, maybe because like something's got to account for this. Exactly. But I 100% understand that reluctance, and it's kind of like what you were saying, like once it can work twofold. Once a child is labelled, they go into a new setting and they're like, oh, they're going to be a problem because of this label, they're going to be a problem. Or they don't have a label, Therefore, they don't have the ability to see the need without the official label, and still, they're a problem. So you're kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place sometimes, I think, and you're worried about people underestimating your children, not thinking that they're capable. That, you know what you're talking about, the narratives. Some parents are worried about their children having these narrative about themselves. You have this, or you have that, or you are this, or you are that. Therefore, you can't. Yeah. And I think there's a lot around that.
And before, when you gave the example of, you know, sometimes being like young black SEND students sometimes being perceived as less vulnerable, I want to focus now on girls. Do you feel like when you were at school, like from your experience, especially like with like the black girls, that they were good at masking in terms of, you know, like maybe difficulties that they were having, like academically, like socially, and is that something you feel like teachers were able to pick up on?
Then? It's like what you were saying, like in school you remember the odd person.
Yeah.
You might think of one or two people throughout your most of your school career.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it couldn't have just been one or two people. Like, it couldn't have just been one or two people.
No way.
Yeah, there's no way it could have been. And so I feel like there's no doubt in my mind that there were a lot of people walking around being like, this is how I am at school. This is how I have to be at school. But then it's twofold, because I feel like now what happens is you have children that mask at school and they go home and they let it all out because they have parents who are more, you know, open and or whatever word you want to use. You have parents who are more aware, who are more educated. So the children know mum is a safe space. Mum understands how I am, but for whatever reason in school they want to be. They want to do the right thing. They want to be the model student. They want to look like they're for whatever reason they mask in school and they go home and they lay it out. But I feel like for a lot of people when we were in school, they probably had nowhere to go. You're this way in school, and if you weren't that way in school, when you got home, you were gonna get it because your parents were like, "What is this behavior?
Yeah.
What is this behavior, Pooja? What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And so there was really nowhere for them to kind of do the whole meltdown and whatever for anyone to really pick up. They were just in this mode of, this is how you are meant to be as a person, as a student, as a child, whatever. And I feel like it would have been a lot harder than just culturally, just all round culturally. It would have been a lot harder.
And what does masking look like? How do you pick up on whether someone's masking? Because like you said, if they're going to school and that's their norm, you're just like, no, that's
usually
how it's
you know
every
a
day.
child is masking because of the feedback that you get from parents at home. And so the child will do.
They're not like this at home, or they're not like this at school.
So very, very often they're so good at school. At nighttime, I'm struggling. They won't go to bed. They cry for an hour. They won't eat. They scream. They make themselves sick. I can't get them up in the morning. They're hitting me. They're throwing things. Like the children at home are like, and then you hear it and you're just like, they're not like that. Yeah. They're not behaving like that in school. That is usually the biggest indicator that a child might be masking in school, is when the parents get home and they're innocent. They feel safe enough to just let it all out. The parents and the home, the family are getting the brunt of it because in school they've given everything that they've got today to showing up and being like, you know, a good child.
No, that's interesting. And I know you shared, I'm not sure how long ago it was, but I remember seeing on social media and you shared like your own journey in terms of like being diagnosed. Like what made you even want to pursue that at you know, such a late like stage? Or if it's late, I know people do it in adulthood, but what made you pursue that?
I think the first thought that I had was like, oh my God, life just feels really hard all the time. Like just literally, just like everything feels really hard. Like, and I'm like, sure, and I would watch other people, and I'm like, other people just don't seem to find it really difficult to do adult things, like stay on top of their bills, put a load of washing on, make sure that their things are organized, remember their appointments, be punctual, show up on time. Just really kind of everyday, pretty mundane things. I'm like, how can it be hard to wash Like to stay on top of your laundry, like letting your laundry pile up and then you have 6 loads that you have to do in a weekend because you're like, I don't have any more clothes. And I'm like, once in a while, but that was my approach to laundry. Or I'm at work and I'm sitting at work and I get to the end of the day and I'm like, I haven't done anything. Like I haven't avoided. I haven't done anything. Or I'll be home all day and I'll have this list of things to do and then my partner come home and be like, what have you done today? And I'm like, I don't know. What have I done today? And life just felt really hard. That's the only way I can describe it. And everything felt like a task. Stop what I'm doing, to go to the toilet, to make food, to make lunch, to tidy up after I cook. Everything was like, exhale. Like everything felt really hard. And it was when I was at work and I was just like, I like my job. I came back to study to be a teacher. I'm paying. This is my choice. I'm not being forced. Like I want to do this. Why am I not doing it? Why am I not getting it done? Why does everything feel so hard? That was the first inclination. And I remember speaking to my dad about it. And he's like, no, you're fine. There's nothing wrong with me. Nothing wrong with you. You're just like me. And looking back, I'm just like, yeah, you're the one who gave this to me, whatever. And it was, again, so that happened when I first went back to teaching. I had a lot of these thoughts and I was teaching for a couple of years. And this was in my second school, which I absolutely loved. But I'd sit down at my desk and it was just doing things, like getting things done, staying focused, staying on task, feeling productive and like a responsible adult. I was like, nah, bro, I'm 30 something, like this is enough. Like what is going on? And I didn't, at the time, didn't really know what ADHD was. I just literally typed in my symptoms. I just literally typed in all the things that I find difficult, all the things I struggle with. And it came up and I read it and I remember I just burst out in crying. I was like, this is me. Surely this is me. And I got assessed. And then immediately after the woman was like, yeah, you have ADHD. Wow. And then, and that was it. And it's definitely, and I think that's why I advocate for diagnosis, because I feel like I'm pretty good at picking up when it is my ADHD. Like I'm doing something, I'll be in the middle of something and I'm like, okay, this is that talking. So you have to pause and be really intentional. Otherwise you just get lost in doing one thing, then switching to something else, then opening a tab, then seeing an email, then you go to sit down to work on an application. And then an hour and a half later, you've gone through your emails, you've cleared out your inbox, you've printed, you've replied to, I don't know, other applications, you've started something else, you've started planning your calendar for next week. And it's like, I came to sit down to do an application. Yeah. And so I know when that's happening now. I'm very aware of when it's showing up.
And when, and in terms of the process, you got diagnosed. So for example, I know with like CAMS, so like children and adults mental health service, like they give schools like the child's care plan and whatever else. Like, do they give adults a care plan as well? So like, how does it work in terms of support? So
because I have the diagnosis, your employer, because it's listed, I'm disabled. I have a special educational need.
Blue badge.
They won't give you one of those. I did try. I did look into it, but
I would have looked into it.
Yeah, they won't give me one. But no, so I am considered to have a disability. So if I because I have a diagnosis, I can go to my workplace and I can be like, look, you have to do this because if you don't, I'm gonna take you to court. But I don't. I tend not to. Like my school's fine or whatever. But if I did work somewhere and I really did need like accommodations, they would have to make them.
Okay. That's
so it's really at that. I mean, as an adult, it's on you to really advocate for yourself and have your diagnosis and take it and explain and work with your employer.
And do you feel confident? Like there's no bit of like embarrassment. Oh, I don't want my. Like, do you feel confident having those conversations with like HR?
I think at first. I think a lot of that will be how determined you are to always advocate for yourself in general, and then it will also depend on where you work. So like in this current school, I would have no qualms. But the way the school is, it's very. I don't really need to. The way that the school is, the culture, everything like that, I don't really need to. But if I did need to, I wouldn't have any qualms about it. And to be fair, a lot of my colleagues, like my colleague that I work with, like my partner teacher, she knows what my things are. So she knows that in terms of like calendars, dates, remembering things, it's not an expectation that she holds against me. So if I say something to her, I can literally say to her, can you please remind me? She said, yeah, I'll remind you. And that's how we work. Like we'll be sitting next to each other and someone will say, can you do this on Thursday? And I'm like, sure. And she's like, no, you can't, you have to do this. And I'm like, no, sorry, I can't, I have to do this. She just knows. And so I have a really amazing working relationship with my colleagues. But then if I work somewhere where I thought it was a bit more rigid, I would have to advocate for myself. And as an adult, I'd have to say, this is what I need. This is why I need it. I'm justified in asking for this. And if you don't, make those necessary and reasonable accommodations for me, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah.
So, but there's a confidence that comes with that as well, obviously.
Oh, that's important. And do you feel like because of your diagnosis, when it comes to working and supporting other children, do you feel like your lived experience sort of gives you
100%.
an advantage?
Especially with ADHD. I just feel like it's so misunderstood. Like a child will sit down and 15 minutes later, they haven't started. And even I can get annoyed, like, what have you been doing for 20 minutes?
Yeah.
And then they'll literally say something like, I didn't have a sheet, or I didn't have a pencil, or I didn't know what to do, or whatever. And I'm like, I actually get it. Like I actually get it, and I have to take it. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'm short with them.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but then also I have to I can't coddle them. Like, for example, if you come to me and you say after 20 minutes I didn't have a pencil, and you've done that once or twice a day, but when that's becoming a habit, it's not that I think you're doing it on purpose, but I also need to say to you, it's not acceptable. If this is something that happens, and you know that if you don't have a pencil you'll get distracted, you won't start, you need to make sure that you will say to an adult, I don't have a pencil, and I will help you, or I will make sure that you have a pencil available. And if I have forgotten to make sure you have a pencil available, you have to stop me what I'm doing and say, Azryah, I don't have a pencil, I need a pencil. You cannot use the fact that you don't have a pencil as a reason to consistently not use your time. So there's a balance between, I'll make space for you, but also I'm not going to be permissive about you using that as a reason to not do.
And do you share that with your students? Do you say to them, I've got ADHD as well? Is that a bit too personal? Like,
I don't actually, funny enough, I don't tell the kids, but if I do speak to parents about it, because depending on where they're at, because very often I have to say to them, like, I want you to know, like, I really do understand. I'm not saying this from a place of, and even, people can empathize to wonderful degrees, and you don't have to have ADHD to truly empathize with a child. But sometimes I just do let parents know, like, I really want you to know, I really do understand. So, like, qualms about, like, if pupils are going through titration, for example, and they're starting the medication, I've
got no idea what that is.
So it's when you start medication and they have to figure out,
okay,
medically, what is a healthy dose where it works, but you don't have side effects or whatever.
I've been through that titration. That's what that is.
So stuff like that, parents can be really skeptical about, or using medication. I have to say, like, from my own experience, these are the genuine side effects and these are the benefits. And just being really open with them for that first-hand experience, so they know that it's coming from a place of genuine first-hand experience, but also, like, I really want you to know I do truly empathize because I've been through.
And what are your thoughts on medication? I
think it depends on the child's behaviour, and I think it depends on the child's side effects. I have in a previous school that I worked in, I remember I had a child who was autistic and ADHD. When he came off the medication, it was like a different child. It was the best thing.
When he came off?
When he came off. But then, having said that, I wasn't there before he was on it, so I don't know what that was like either. But I remember, I was there while he was on it, and it was horrible. It was horrible. It was horrible for him. And he came off, and it was like a different child, a completely different child. But then I also see children who get very distressed that they can't focus, who get very distressed that they're finding things difficult, who really find it difficult to manage their emotions, and it means that they get in trouble, or they're constantly and that is hard, but that too is also very hard and distressing for them. So it's really difficult, and I say it's up to the parents, and if you want to try it, and if you don't like it, stop. That's the advice that I give to parents. I
think that's a good advice. If you don't like it, stop, because it's a catch-22.
It really is.
I recall one of, like, before, when I was working at the secondary school as a head of year, one of my students who, like, he wasn't the worst student, mind you. I was getting on-called quite a bit for him. There was always stuff on the playground, whatever, but he wasn't the worst student. It was just like, you're top 5 in the year group.
It's the consistent, the amount.
You're top 5 in the year group, but you're not getting excluded. You're just, like, you're just in my emails every day. And he went on medication, and I saw him maybe like a week after on the playground. And if you know the guy on the playground, he was like a rocket. Like, he's playing patball over there, disturbing the year 10's basketball game over here. And it's just like, oh, come on, man. Like, you're everywhere. And I just saw him just walking around the playground. How you doing? Like, yeah, I'm all right. Are you okay? Yeah. I went to my office. I was like, bro, what is this? Like, this ain't him. And that hurt me. And I was like, nah.
Yeah.
Like, you've basically taken away his personality. He ended up moving schools. And mind you, like, he's doing well now because he hit me up on Insta DM like about last year just to like check in and like we spoke and whatever. So if he is listening, he knows who he is, like big him up. But that experience for me was just like, you know, when you see these memes like, oh, that's not Gucci, that's a clone. I was like, yeah, this is a clone.
Yeah.
This is not the same. You know, I know we're trying to like suppress, you know, those like over you know, exuberant like behaviors, but I know I just found that difficult. And you know, just as we finish off, I want you to share, like, for you, what do you think's one of like the biggest misconceptions that society has around SEND, around special educational needs?
I think the biggest misconception. So when you look at special educational needs, you have different models. So you have what would be called a medical model, which means that SEN is a medical need. So, for example, that might refer to people who are, you know, paralyzed or missing limbs or visually impaired or whatever. In which case, what they need to support their needs is different. And then I can't even remember, there's 4, I can't even remember the other 4 now. But then the other one will be the social model that says actually disabilities exist because of certain contexts. So if you put someone in a different context, they're not disabled anymore. So if I think about someone who has ADHD and like the executive function is difficult. If I had a day where I could get up and I didn't have to be at work at an exact time on the dot, and if when I ate lunch wasn't dictated to by somebody else, and if my deadlines were more flexible, and if I didn't have to sit at a desk, you know, in a cubicle, let's say that was my daily life. If you took away that context and gave me a different context, no one would know that I'm disabled. No one would know that I have difficulties doing certain things, because socially the world is set up for people whose mind work a particular way. What would what would be neurotypical? And I think that whatever percentage of people that we think are disabled, that are autistic, that are ADHD, first of all, it's way more than that. And secondly, if it's no longer a minority, are you really disabled, or is it just that people are not the same? People are just different. Like I do not feel like a disabled person. I understand clinically, I understand, you know, officially, all of that. I get that, but I don't think I have a disability. I feel like that I have to exist in a world that requires me to do certain things that I find difficult, but I don't consider myself disabled. I can't speak for other people that have ADHD. This is a very personal lens. But then sometimes I change my mind. Sometimes I'm like, this is hard, I'm struggling. And so that ebbs and flows, that how I perceive myself ebbs and flows. But I think as much as I appreciate and believe in, you know, all these things that exist, the diagnosis, the labeling or whatever, I believe in all of those things. And I think we have a right to be able to use those things so that we can fight for our space and what we need, etc. I feel like if the world was not even crazy different, if the world was a little bit different, we'd realize that there's way more people that have ADHD. There's way more people that are autistic or whatever, because I do think it's about the way the mind works, as opposed to this person is disabled and there's something wrong with them. That's my main thing.
No, that's powerful. That's powerful. And, you know, thank you for sharing, you know, the episode. Just everything that you share has just been so insightful. You know, thank you for your you know, transparency, and even the stuff that you do online, like just the continued advocacy. So yeah, that's been amazing. And just the last thing to share, if there's anyone listening in terms of like family or parents who have kids that have like SEND needs and need like support, like where would you direct families to go in terms of support?
So I think if you have school-age children, the school is a great support network, and they should be able to signpost you to different agencies that can support you. GPs are also a great place to go. But then there's lots of different organisations that will work. So, for example, if we look at like exclusion rates and then we look at how that's linked to SEN, you have things like no more exclusions. And so if you have so for example, you see children and they have needs and it manifests in behaviour, that's a different, that's nuance compared to a child who has a vision impairment, completely different. And so you can't just go to your GP and say, oh yeah, he's going to be excluded, So you need to almost triangulate services. So it's hard for me to signpost one. I feel like there's lots of people online. I think my biggest piece of advice is educate yourself as much as you can on what is available to you and what your rights are as a parent with a child or as a young adult or whatever who has SEN, because they really do bet on people not knowing what they're entitled to. Because if people don't know, they won't ask you. You ain't got to spend the money. Like, I'm a bit of a cynic when it comes to that, but I genuinely do think they bank on people not being educated. So as much as I can, signpost to all of these agencies, the best thing you can do is show up to those places being like, I know that this is what I'm entitled to. So find whoever in this place is going to help me do it. That's the kind of energy you need. And then you have advocates. You can have advocates who will help you with that. And you can,
And when those knowledgeable parents come through the door, those teachers get angry, boy.
Yeah.
How dare you? How dare you know your rights and policies?
Exactly. And I will say, I think most teachers want to help. But even teachers, a lot of teachers are not educated on, especially if you don't work in SEN, especially if you're like, for example, in a secondary school and you teach maths. What business you're not wasting your time.
You got no
wasting your time, quote unquote, with that stuff. There's somebody in the school who does that. You teach maths, so I think it's really important that people expand their
No, that's important. That's
horizons.
important. Thank you again for sharing. It's been an amazing episode. So that was the Too Cool for School podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on our social media platforms.